Allison Carter sat in the back row of courtroom 4B, her hands trembling as she stared at the man sitting at the defense table. He looked smaller now, diminished somehow, in his orange jail jumpsuit with his hands shackled in front of him. But those eyes, those same eyes that had smiled at her across birthday cakes and Christmas dinners, those eyes that had watched her grow up, now refused to meet hers. Her Uncle Michael, the man who had destroyed her life, the man who had stolen her 18th birthday and turned it into a nightmare she would carry forever. As the bailiff called the court to order, Allison felt her mother's hand grip hers tightly. In just a few minutes, she would have to take the stand and tell a room full of strangers what Michael had done to her. She would have to relive the worst night of her life while he sat there, just feet away, listening. She would have to speak the words that had been trapped in her throat for months, words that had almost killed her to keep silent. The prosecutor stood and said the words that made it all real. The state calls Allison Carter to the stand. This is the only witness. And this is the story of how one night of betrayal became a battle for justice, how a family celebration became a crime scene, and how one young woman found the courage to speak a truth that would tear her family apart, but ultimately set her free. Let me take you back to where it all began. March 15th, 2023, Rockwell, North Carolina. A small town of about 8,000 people nestled in the foothills of the Blue Ridge Mountains. The kind of place where high school football games are the biggest event of the week, where the local diner knows your order before you sit down, where generations of families have lived in the same houses on the same streets for decades. It's the kind of town where you trust your neighbors, where you leave your doors unlocked, where family means everything. The Carter family had deep roots in Rockwell. Daniel Carter, 48, owned a small construction company that his father had started in the 1970s. His wife, Rebecca, worked as a secretary at the elementary school. They had 3 children, but Allison was their pride and joy, their oldest, the first in their family to be accepted to college. She had just been admitted to Appalachian State University on an academic scholarship and planned to study nursing, following in her grandmother's footsteps. Allison was everything a parent could ask for. She volunteered at the hospital on weekends, she sang in the church choir, she tutored younger students after school. She was the kind of girl teachers wrote glowing recommendation letters for, the kind of daughter parents bragged about at the grocery store. Her 18th birthday was supposed to be a celebration of all she had accomplished and all she was about to become. Among the people who loved Allison most in the world was her Uncle Michael. Michael Carter was Daniel's younger brother, 43 years old, never married, no children of his own. He had been a constant presence in Allison's life since the day she was born. He was at every birthday party, every school play, every softball game. He taught her to ride a bike. He helped her with math homework when she struggled with algebra. He took her to father-daughter dances when Daniel had to work late. He was more than an uncle. He was like a second father, a friend, someone Allison trusted completely and without question. Daniel and Rebecca trusted him too. They trusted him enough to let him babysit when the kids were young. They trusted him enough to give him a key to their house. They trusted him enough to never question why he spent so much time with Allison, why he always wanted to take her places, why he gave her expensive gifts and special attention. They thought it was sweet. They thought he was compensating for not having children of his own. They thought he just loved his niece. They had no idea what kind of monster lived behind that smile. On the night of March 15th, 2023, the Carter family threw a party for Allison's 18th birthday. It was a backyard barbecue at their house on Sycamore Street, nothing fancy, just family and close friends. About 25 people showed up. There was pulled pork on the grill, potato salad, sweet tea in plastic cups, a playlist of country music playing from a speaker on the porch. Allison wore a blue sundress her mother had bought for the occasion and a silver necklace her grandmother had given her that morning. Uncle Michael was there, of course. He arrived early to help set up tables and chairs. He brought Allison a chocolate cake from the bakery she loved downtown, the one with the cream cheese frosting she had been eating since she was a little girl. He handed her a birthday card with $100 bill inside and a note written in his neat handwriting that said, "So proud of the young woman you've become. The world is yours now." As the sun set and the party moved into the evening, people started saying their goodbyes. Allison's grandparents left around 8:30. Her younger siblings went to spend the night at their cousin's house. Friends hugged Allison and promised to text later. By 9:30, only a handful of people remained. By 10, it was just Allison's parents and Uncle Michael sitting around the fire pit in the backyard, talking and laughing while Allison gathered wrapping paper and ribbons from her presents. Around 10:30, Allison said she was tired and wanted to go inside. Her parents were cleaning up, carrying plates and cups into the kitchen. Uncle Michael stood up and offered to help Allison take her presents upstairs to her room. He had done it every year at every birthday party since she was small. Daniel and Rebecca didn't think twice about it. They said goodnight and went back to washing dishes. Uncle Michael followed Allison into the house, up the stairs, and into her bedroom. And once that door closed behind them, everything changed. If you're following this story and want to hear more cases where family betrayal led to devastating consequences, don't forget to subscribe to The Only Witness. We tell the stories that expose the darkest corners of family secrets and demand accountability. I won't describe what happened in that bedroom. Out of respect for Allison and for every survivor who has lived through something similar, the details of the assault will remain private. What you need to know is this. For over an hour, Michael Carter sexually assaulted his 18-year-old niece in her own bedroom while her parents were downstairs, believing their daughter was safe. He violated her in ways that would leave scars no one could see, but that Allison would feel every single day for the rest of her life. When it was over, Michael straightened his shirt, told Allison that what had happened was between them, that if she told anyone it would destroy the family, that no one would believe her anyway, and that she should be grateful he cared about her so much. Then he walked downstairs, said goodnight to Daniel and Rebecca, thanked them for a wonderful party, and drove home like nothing had happened. Allison sat on her bedroom floor, her back against the door, her body shaking, her mind unable to process what had just been done to her. She didn't cry. She couldn't. She just sat there in the dark, staring at nothing, feeling like her entire world had collapsed in on itself. Downstairs, she could hear her parents laughing, hear the sound of the dishwasher running, hear the TV turn on. They had no idea. They thought their daughter was upstairs tired from a long day of celebrating. They thought she was happy. They thought she was safe. She wasn't. Allison didn't sleep that night. She lay in her bed staring at the ceiling, replaying everything that had happened, trying to understand how the uncle she loved, the uncle she trusted, had turned into a monster. She felt dirty, broken, ashamed, and more than anything, she felt guilty, like somehow this was her fault, like she had done something to make this happen. These are the lies that assault does to your mind. It convinces you that you're to blame for something someone else did to you. The next morning, Allison came downstairs and pretended everything was fine. She ate breakfast with her parents. She smiled when her mother asked if she had a good birthday. She said yes, it was perfect. She went through the motions because she didn't know what else to do. She couldn't find the words to tell her parents what had happened. She couldn't bear the thought of destroying their relationship with Michael, of tearing the family apart, of being the reason everything fell to pieces. So she stayed silent. For 4 days, Allison carried the secret alone. She went to school, she sat through classes, she talked to friends, she answered questions about her birthday party and said it had been great, but inside she was dying. She couldn't eat. She couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Michael's face, felt his hands, heard his voice telling her to keep quiet. She started having panic attacks in the middle of the day, her chest tightening, her breath coming in short gasps, her vision blurring. She would lock herself in the bathroom at school and cry until she had nothing left. On the 4th day, Allison broke. She was in her English class trying to focus on a discussion about some book she couldn't remember the title of, when suddenly she couldn't breathe. The walls felt like they were closing in. She stood up, mumbled something about needing the bathroom, and stumbled out of the classroom. She made it halfway down the hall before her legs gave out and she collapsed against the lockers, sobbing so hard she couldn't catch her breath. Her English teacher, Mrs. Sandra Whitmore, found her there. Mrs. Whitmore knelt down beside Allison, put a hand on her shoulder, and asked what was wrong. And in that moment, With a teacher she barely knew showing her more kindness than she had felt in days, Allison couldn't hold it in anymore. Between sobs and gasps for air, she told Mrs. Whitmore what her Uncle Michael had done to her on her birthday. Mrs. Whitmore, a mandated reporter under North Carolina law, immediately took Allison to the school counselor's office. Within 30 minutes, the school resource officer was there. Within an hour, Detective Lisa Harper from the Rockwell Police Department was sitting across from Allison in a private room, listening, as this 18-year-old girl, still in her school uniform, described in painful detail how her uncle had sexually assaulted her. Detective Harper was gentle but thorough. She asked questions that made Allison relive every moment she was trying to forget, but she also made it clear that none of this was Allison's fault, that she was brave for coming forward, and that they were going to do everything they could to hold Michael accountable. By the time the interview was over, Allison felt like she had been turned inside out, every part of her exposed and raw. Her parents were called to the school. When Daniel and Rebecca Carter walked into that counselor's office and learned what their daughter had just disclosed, the world as they knew it ended. Rebecca fell into a chair, her hands covering her face, sobbing so hard her whole body shook. Daniel stood frozen, his face cycling through disbelief, horror, and then pure rage. His brother, his own brother, the man he had trusted with his daughter's life, had done this. Daniel wanted to leave immediately, wanted to find Michael and do things that would have landed him in prison. Detective Harper stopped him, explained that going after Michael would only make things worse, that the best thing he could do for his daughter was let the police handle it. Daniel didn't want to listen, but Rebecca grabbed his arm and begged him to stay calm, to think about Allison, to be there for her. So Daniel stayed, but everyone in that room could see the fury burning behind his eyes. That evening, Detective Harper and 2 other officers went to Michael Carter's apartment on the other side of town. He lived alone in a small 1-bedroom unit above a hardware store, the kind of place where you could hear your neighbors through the walls and the carpet smelled faintly of mildew. When officers knocked on his door, Michael opened it with a confused smile, like he couldn't imagine why the police would be there. Detective Harper asked if he would come to the station to answer some questions about Allison Carter. Michael's smile faded. He asked what this was about. Detective Harper said they just needed to talk. Michael asked if he needed a lawyer. Detective Harper told him that was his right, but they really just wanted to hear his side of things. Michael agreed to come, probably thinking he could charm his way out of whatever this was, probably thinking that Allison would never actually tell anyone. He was wrong. Before we continue, hit subscribe to The Only Witness, because some truths are too dark to stay buried. We tell the stories that demand justice and expose predators hiding in plain sight. At the Rockwell Police Department, Michael Carter sat in a small interrogation room with grey walls and a metal table bolted to the floor. Detective Harper sat across from him, a folder in front of her containing Allison's statement. She started with easy questions, establishing a timeline of the birthday party, confirming that Michael had been there, that he had helped Allison take presents to her room. Michael was cooperative at first, friendly even. He talked about how much he loved his niece, how proud he was of her, how he had always been close to her. Then Detective Harper asked the question that changed everything. Did anything happen between you and Allison that night in her bedroom? Michael paused. His expression shifted. He said no. Nothing happened. They just set some presents down and talked for a few minutes about college. That was it. Detective Harper leaned forward. Allison says something different. She says you were in her room for over an hour. She says you sexually assaulted her. Do you want to tell me what really happened? Michael's face went pale. He started talking faster, his words tumbling over each other. He said Allison was confused. Maybe she misunderstood something he said. Maybe she had been drinking and didn't remember things clearly. He suggested that teenagers sometimes make up stories for attention, that maybe Allison was upset about something else and projecting it onto him. Detective Harper let him talk. She let him dig his own grave with every lie that came out of his mouth. Then she opened the folder and slid a piece of paper across the table. It was a printout of text messages Michael had sent to Allison's phone, in the days after her birthday. "I hope you're okay. Please don't say anything about what happened. This needs to stay between us. You know I care about you." Michael stared at the messages. His mouth opened and closed like he was trying to find words that wouldn't come. Detective Harper asked him again. "What happened in Allison's bedroom that night?" Michael asked for a lawyer. The interview ended, but Detective Harper had everything she needed. Over the next 3 weeks, investigators built a case against Michael Carter. They analyzed his text messages, which showed a clear pattern of trying to keep Allison silent. They interviewed Allison multiple times, and her story never changed. They talked to Allison's friends, who said she had been acting strange and withdrawn in the days after her birthday. They spoke to Mrs. Whitmore, who described finding Allison having a breakdown in the school hallway. Then something else emerged. Another woman came forward. Her name was Jessica Monroe, and she was Michael's ex-girlfriend from 5 years earlier. She told police that Michael had been emotionally and sexually abusive during their relationship, that he had a pattern of manipulating and controlling women, that she had always felt uncomfortable with how much attention he paid to his young niece, but had never said anything because she thought she was being paranoid. Jessica's statement added crucial context. This wasn't a one-time mistake. This was a pattern of predatory behavior. Michael Carter had spent years positioning himself as the trusted, loving uncle so that when the time came, he could exploit that trust. On April 10th, 2023, an arrest warrant was issued for Michael Carter. He was charged with first-degree sexual assault, sexual battery, and taking indecent liberties with a minor. Even though Allison was 18 at the time of the assault, North Carolina law recognizes that sexual contact obtained through coercion, manipulation, or abuse of a familial relationship constitutes a crime. Officers arrested Michael at his workplace, a small accounting firm where he had worked for 15 years. His co-workers watched in shock as he was led out in handcuffs, his head down, his face red with shame. The local newspaper ran the story with his mugshot on the front page. "Local man arrested for sexual assault of niece." The Carter family was destroyed. Daniel's relationship with his extended family imploded overnight. Some relatives refused to believe that Michael could do something so terrible. They accused Allison of lying, of trying to ruin Michael's life, of seeking attention. Others immediately cut ties with anyone who defended Michael, creating rifts that would never heal. Family dinners stopped, holiday gatherings were cancelled. Cousins stopped speaking to each other. The family that had been so close, so tight-knit, fractured into pieces that could never be put back together. Allison struggled in ways that no 18-year-old should have to struggle. She stopped going to school. She couldn't handle the stares, the whispers, the rumors spreading through the hallways. Some people believed her and offered support. Others called her a liar, said she was trying to get attention, said she was ruining a good man's life over nothing. The comments on social media were vicious. Strangers who knew nothing about what had happened felt entitled to judge her, to question her, to tear her apart. Rebecca Carter quit her job at the elementary school. She couldn't face the questions, the pity, the gossip. She spent her days at home taking care of Allison, who barely left her bedroom. Daniel threw himself into work, staying late at job sites, avoiding coming home because he didn't know how to fix what had been broken. He felt like a failure as a father, like he should have seen the signs, should have protected his daughter, should have known that his own brother was a monster. The months leading up to the trial were the hardest of Allison's life. She had to meet with prosecutors multiple times to prepare her testimony. She had to relive the assault over and over, answering questions about details she wanted to forget. She had to undergo a forensic psychological evaluation to assess her mental state. She started therapy, but healing felt impossible when she knew she would eventually have to stand in a courtroom and face Michael again. Michael Carter pleaded not guilty to all charges. His defense attorney argued that the encounter had been consensual, that Allison was 18 and legally an adult, and that she had later regretted what happened and falsely accused Michael to avoid taking responsibility. It was a disgusting strategy, but it was the only one Michael had. The trial began in October 2023. Allison had been dreading this day for months. She barely slept the night before. Her mother helped her pick out clothes that morning, something simple and respectful, a black blouse and grey slacks. Rebecca brushed Allison's hair and told her she was the bravest person she had ever known. Daniel hugged his daughter and told her he would be right there in the courtroom the entire time. The courtroom was packed. Reporters sat in the back, taking notes. Family members filled the gallery, some supporting Allison, others there for Michael. Allison's hands shook as she walked to her seat. She could feel Michael's eyes on her, but she refused to look at him. The prosecution presented their case first. They called Detective Harper, who described the investigation and the evidence they had gathered. They called Mrs. Whitmore, who testified about finding Allison in the hallway having a panic attack. They called Jessica Monroe, who described Michael's history of manipulation and control. And then they called Allison. When the prosecutor said her name, Allison felt like she might throw up. Her mother squeezed her hand. Her father nodded encouragingly. She stood up, walked to the witness stand and raised her right hand to be sworn in. For the next 2 hours, Allison testified. She answered questions about her relationship with Michael, about the birthday party, about what happened in her bedroom that night. She cried. She struggled to get words out. She had to pause multiple times to compose herself. But she told the truth. Every painful, humiliating detail. Michael's defense attorney cross-examined her. He tried to poke holes in her story, suggesting she had misremembered details, implying she had wanted the encounter and later regretted it, asking why she had waited 4 days to report what happened. It was brutal. Allison felt like she was being attacked all over again, but this time in front of a room full of strangers. Her mother had to step outside because she couldn't bear to watch. But Allison didn't break. She answered every question. She stayed calm. She looked the defense attorney in the eye and told him that she knew what had happened to her, that she would never forget it, and that nothing he said would change the truth. When Allison finally stepped down from the stand, she felt like she had run a marathon. She was exhausted, emotionally drained, but also relieved. She had done it. She had told her story. She had faced Michael and refused to let him silence her. Michael Carter took the stand in his own defense. He cried. He insisted he had never hurt Allison, that she was lying, that he didn't understand why she was doing this to him. He said he loved his niece and would never harm her. It was a performance, and the jury saw right through it. After 3 days of testimony, closing arguments were delivered. The prosecutor told the jury that Michael Carter was a predator who had spent years grooming his niece, waiting for the right moment to exploit her trust. The defense attorney argued that the evidence was insufficient, that reasonable doubt existed, that Allison's story didn't add up. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. When they came back, the courtroom fell silent. The foreperson stood and read the verdict. Guilty on all counts. Allison burst into tears. Her mother sobbed beside her. Her father put his head in his hands. Michael sat motionless, staring straight ahead, his face blank. At sentencing 2 weeks later, Allison read a victim impact statement. She stood at the podium, her voice shaking but strong, and told the court what Michael had taken from her. Her innocence, her trust, her sense of safety, her relationship with her family. She said she would carry the scars of what he did to her for the rest of her life. She said she hoped he would spend every day in prison thinking about what he had done. The judge sentenced Michael Carter to 20 years in prison with no possibility of parole for 12 years. He was also required to register as a sex offender for life. As he was led out of the courtroom in handcuffs, Michael looked back at his brother one last time. Daniel turned away. If you're new here, subscribe to The Only Witness. We tell real stories that still echo through time. Stories that force us to confront the uncomfortable realities of abuse and betrayal within families. Michael Carter is currently serving his sentence at a North Carolina state prison. He has filed an appeal claiming his trial was unfair. The appeal was denied. He will remain behind bars until at least 2035, when he will be 55 years old. Allison Carter is rebuilding her life. She deferred her enrollment at Appalachian State for a year but started classes in the fall of 2024. She changed her major from nursing to psychology with a focus on trauma counseling. She wants to help other survivors, to be the person for them that she needed during her darkest days. She has joined a support group for sexual assault survivors. She has found her voice and uses it to advocate for others who are still finding theirs. The Carter family is still healing. Daniel and Rebecca have worked hard to support their daughter and to repair their marriage, which was strained by the trauma of the case. They attend family therapy together. They have cut off contact with relatives who defended Michael or blamed Allison. Slowly, painfully, they are learning to trust again. The case sparked conversations in Rockwell about sexual assault within families, about believing survivors, and about the ways predators use trust to access victims. The local high school now has mandatory training on recognizing grooming behavior and reporting abuse. Allison has spoken publicly about her experience, hoping to help other survivors find the courage to come forward. Before we close, we want to hear from you. Comment below and let us know where you're watching from. Are you in the United States, the UK, Canada, Australia, Nigeria, or somewhere else in the world? We love knowing that our community spans across continents, united by the demand for truth and justice. Drop your location in the comments and let's connect. Sexual abuse within families is far more common than most people realize. Statistics show that 1 in 4 girls and 1 in 13 boys will experience sexual abuse before they turn 18. The vast majority of these abuses are committed not by strangers, but by someone the child knows and trusts. A family member, a coach, a teacher, a religious leader, someone who has access, who has earned trust, who knows how to manipulate and control. Predators like Michael Carter rely on secrecy, shame, and fear to keep their victims silent. They convince their victims that speaking out will cause more harm than staying quiet. They exploit the love and trust that families place in them. They hide behind smiles and kind gestures while committing terrible acts behind closed doors. But cases like Allison's show that justice is possible, that survivors can speak up, that predators can be held accountable, and that telling the truth, no matter how painful, is the first step toward healing. Allison Carter sat in that courtroom and looked her abuser in the eye. She told her story, she demanded justice, and she got it. She is not defined by what was done to her. She is defined by her courage, her strength, and her refusal to let Michael Carter's actions destroy her life. Sometimes, the people we trust the most are the ones who break us the deepest. But truth, once spoken, becomes power. Allison found that power. She used her voice. She changed the course of her own story. And in doing so, she became an inspiration to countless other survivors who are still fighting to find their voices. This has been the story of Allison Carter, the young woman who turned the worst night of her life into her greatest act of courage. This is the story of a family torn apart by betrayal, but held together by love and the pursuit of justice. And this is the story of Michael Carter, the uncle who wore a mask of kindness while hiding a predator's heart. Subscribe to The Only Witness for more real crime stories that refuse to fade. Stories that remind us why believing survivors matters, why speaking up is powerful, and why justice, though often delayed and painful, is always worth fighting for. Real stories, real pain, real justice. This is The Only Witness.